Welcome to the S.O.A.P video series from Oak Tree Community Church in South Bend, Indiana. We're working our way through the book of 1 Samuel, and we have come, not only are we at the midpoint, but we have come to one of the most famous accounts, narrative stories, whatever you want to call it.
Yep. You got it yet?
In the Bible.
Yeah.
In the Bible.
Which
1
is?
Samuel chapter 17, David and
Goliath.
There it is.
Ooh,
there
nice.
it is.
All right, of course we're not going to start there, right?
Of course, we have to review where are we?
Yeah. Well, previously we saw where God had taken away Saul's dynasty.
Yeah.
Right? So it was, you can still be king, but after you, we're picking another king.
Yeah.
We're going a different route.
Yeah.
And it was because he disobeyed him. Right? And then last week we saw where Saul again disobeyed God, and God's like, all right, you're not even king anymore.
Yeah.
So it seems odd.
It's interesting because he did finish out his
reign.
Yep. Right.
Yep.
But
well, we also see David being anointed as a new king. So now we have this weird thing, but we kind of had it with Saul too, right? Saul was anointed, but then he had to go in front of the elders, and they had to choose him, or they drew the lots. But then even after that, the people hadn't accepted him yet. So it took a while for him to get in. David's taken a lot longer because there's a sitting king.
Yeah.
And Saul just seems to be wearing the crown and like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, but somebody will let me know.
When he's just, from here on out, he's really going to be getting more and more rebellious because he knows he's going to find out that David is anointed king.
Yep.
And,
now it's not going to sit well with him.
Now it's almost like a personal war.
Well, how could it not be from his human standpoint?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so this week, all three chapters are about the conflict between David and Saul.
Yeah.
And that's really going to continue to the end of 1 Samuel.
Yeah, right.
And we start off with David and Goliath. And woo!
Yeah.
Yeah, but here's the setup. Philistines are on one hill. Israelites are on another hill, and there's a valley between them. And, of course, they're jawing at each other, and the two camps are set up, and, there's going to be a war. But the problem is, how do you get from one side to the other?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a plain. It's not like it's,
right.
There's a little bit of a plain, but
in my head, it's...
Yeah. Jump!
Yeah. So the Philistines come up with a deal, and they say, we're going to send out our champion.
Yeah.
And our champion's going to go out, and they're going to taunt Israel, but also say, you send out your champion, and it's a one-on-one duel, winner take all, to the death, and whoever wins, the other side will become their slaves.
Yeah. Seems to make sense.
Right. How much fairer can you get than that, one-on-one? Except they got a little ringer, right? So the description the description of Goliath really doesn't do him justice.
Right.
Right. The text says he's almost 7 feet tall.
Yeah.
But the text really says he's closer to 10 foot.
Yeah, so there is a little bit of a discrepancy in some of the older. So is some of the Hebrew manuscripts, some of the Greek manuscripts, and the translations. There's Dead Sea Scrolls. They sort of like, is it 4 cubits? Is it 6 cubits? Whatever. And the guy is somewhere between 7 and 10 feet tall.
Yeah.
Okay. He's a big guy. We know there are giants. We actually find out that he's got some brothers who are also super tall. There's a genetic thing in his family there. Yeah. Some people think it's a demonic thing in his family. Doesn't matter, because we're going to see that David is still a young man, teenagers probably.
5'2".
Yeah. Some people think that he's in his, small 5 foot, 5.5 foot, whatever. We're talking like, a yard, maybe a meter difference between these two guys, a battle-hardened warrior against a shepherd.
Yep.
And
this battle-hardened warrior is wearing 125 pounds of armor.
Yeah.
And he has a spear with him.
Yeah.
And the head of the spear is 15 pounds.
Yeah.
Not the whole spear.
Not the shaft, just the spear head itself. Yeah.
Right.
And his sword, just the whole thing.
We're calling him big.
He's a big guy. Big guy. And for good reason, everybody on the other side, in the Israelite side, is scared of him.
Right.
It's like, I'm not going out to that guy.
Right. So he comes out every day, and he challenges the Israeli army, and they look around and nobody wants to be the
Nobody's
champion.
standing-
Everybody's tying their sandals
That's
and
right.
doing other things.
You line up and take a step
Yeah.
back and see who's not paying
right.
attention.
Everybody knows that one. Yeah. All right. So now here comes David. So David has 7 older brothers,
Yep.
and 3 of them are in the army. And so it came to David that he had to tend the sheep. But his dad also gave him the job of, I want you to take some food to your brothers. And not spy,
Yeah,
but let me know what's going on.
Yeah, make sure that they're okay.
Yep,
You know.
Yep. And even, their boss, make sure to give him some stuff too, so he's nice to my sons.
Some similarity with Joseph there. I'm seeing some
Yeah.
similarity with Joseph, where Jacob sent Joseph out to spy on his older brothers.
Yeah, true. So David hears the taunting, and now I think we're in day 40 when Goliath is taunting. So by now, all the Israelis are like, yeah, we've heard it before.
heard it.
It's already heard, and it can't hurt worse.
Yeah. Yep.
But this is the first time David heard it.
Yeah.
And David's not happy at all, and he's looking around. What are you guys doing?
Why isn't anybody challenging this guy?
You guys have to do something. So he's mouthing off.
Yeah.
And he gets called out for it by his brothers. And other people are like, hey, the kid said he can take him. I don't see anybody else here.
I know. So this is so funny. This is so funny. Because David's older brother, he's like, why have you come down here? Blah, blah, blah. He's chewing him out. And I mean, you can hear a young kid here, verse 29. David replied, what have I done now? Can I say anything? Am I not even allowed to talk?
I have heard your David say those exact words.
I know. Older brother, younger brother. I mean, you can see it in here.
Yeah.
You just hear it.
Yeah. So, they're discounting him because he's a small kid, and they're discounting him because he's a shepherd. And he comes back with, look, I'm a shepherd. I've had to fight off bears. I've had to fight off lions. I can fight off this
guy.
Philistine.
Yeah. He's just a dog.
Yep. And then he says, he'll be just like one of them because he has defiled the armies of the living God.
Yeah.
So right away off the bat, David is bringing God in.
So that's my question. I mean, we've seen in the previous chapter that Saul had a priest with him and still wasn't making good decisions. Where's the priest?
Yeah.
Where's the ephod here? Where is Saul trying to ask God, what am I supposed to do with this? Right. We have these Philistines over here. He is challenging you, God. That's nowhere until David shows up.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point because we see it time after time in Saul, but it needs to be pointed out that Saul's first thing is people.
Yep.
And then it's like, oh, yeah, God, okay, yeah, let's build an altar.
Yeah, God is
or whatever.
always an afterthought.
Where David is more, God's honor is at stake.
Exactly. Which, it really was. Again, and I've said this before, we keep coming back to it in some of these narratives. In ancient civilizations, this is why they were willing to just send out one guy. There's no reason for everybody to die because it's really a battle of the gods anyway. Yeah. And so, he was insulting the true and living God. And David said, we don't play that game.
Right.
Not on this side. Right. Saul, why aren't you staying king? Why aren't you standing up to this? Why aren't you out there defending our God?
So in my mind, David mouthed off enough that they took him to Saul.
Yeah.
But either way, he gets an audience with Saul, and Saul's like, this is not going to work at all. And David, shows some courage in there that Saul hadn't seen. And Saul's like, I don't see. This is like the only choice I got.
Yeah,
it's not going to be me. So of course he gives him Saul's armor, and I think this is where we get how small David is because the armor is not fitting him at all. But also Saul's huge.
Saul's a big guy.
Yeah.
I don't think it actually says this is too big, but it's like I can't even walk in this stuff. This is not going to work.
It's too big. Plus he's not used to it.
Yeah.
Too. So he goes back to what he's used to. And he picks up 5 stones, and he has his sling. It's interesting. It's not a slingshot, right? It's a sling.
It's a sling, right?
Yeah, that he goes around, and
his staff, his shepherd's staff.
Yep.
It's like I'm gonna poke the bear, man.
And so they meet, and Goliath's got to be happy. Goliath's got to be really happy with the choice, and Goliath is, let's say, overconfident.
He's almost insulted. Actually, you sent out this boy, you sent out this dog to come see me, this puppy, you know, he's with a stick.
And he's telling David exactly what's going to happen. Right? Now, I think it works because, again, David has 7 older brothers. He's probably heard this all of his life, right? With what's going on.
Yep.
So,
I mean, this is almost, I'm sure almost everybody knows the story. Maybe you've never heard or seen it before, but I mean, it's
to the death. They were far away from each other. Goliath coming in to kill David. David takes one rock, puts it in Goliath's head. Goliath falls, doesn't seem to be dead at that point, but he's on the ground.
Yeah.
David runs over, takes Goliath's sword and cuts his head off.
Yeah.
Game over.
Now he's dead.
Yeah, game over. He's got the head in his hand.
I always think of like a Medusa.
Yeah. Exactly. Now, the Philistines had vowed to be servants.
Yeah.
They forgot.
I mean, obviously they're going to line up and just walk over to the Israelite camp, right?
Yeah, they take off. They take off running, and of course the Israeli nation follows them.
Yeah,
and, with a slaughter, and they killed them and looted their camp.
Yeah.
So the end of the chapter, I'm sure Saul congratulated David, but it doesn't say that, right? Saul is saying, "Who's his father?
Yeah, who is this?
Where'd this kid come from?
Yeah.
We need to find out more about this kid." So right away, again, he's not thinking about God. He's thinking about himself and his dynasty, which isn't going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, it could have been, where do I send the reward? Because there was a specific reward he'd already promised and everything. But one of the questions that comes up is, I thought at the end of chapter 16, David was his armor bearer and there was already this great, relationship. This is one of those areas, I think, that chapter 16 just sort of summarizes a long time, and chapter 17 and 18, they happen during the end of chapter 16. It's not like David became his armor bearer, then Goliath showed up and Saul magically forgot who this kid was.
Yeah.
Because he's still living at home, dad is still sending him out.
Right, he's still,
so the end of chapter 16 is a summary of some years.
Yeah, and the other thing that's interesting is Saul doesn't let David go back home.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, no, you're with me now.
Yeah. Right.
I'm going to keep you close.
Yeah.
Until we figure this out.
Right.
On what's going on.
Right.
So in chapter 18, David becomes best friends with Saul's son, a guy by the name of Jonathan, who we think is really young, but he can't be because he's leading troops.
Yeah. So I mentioned this last time, just sort of as a setup. We sort of think of them as both teenagers and running around together. Jonathan has to be at least 10 years, if not more, older than David.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe 10 or 20 years older than David. We don't know. Right? But I'm looking at this really more, it says that they loved each other. They were best friends, committed, to each other's, benefit and welfare and everything. I see it more like a mentor, mentee relationship here.
Yeah. One interesting thing in there is Jonathan gives up his clothes.
Yeah.
Now, David doesn't have anything, right? He's a shepherd.
Right.
But it was also a signal, or maybe we're reading too much into it, that the crown prince is giving up his role or his title, which I don't know how much he knew that his father was taken out of the dynasty, and Jonathan wasn't going to be king anyways.
We do see that in upcoming chapters. This week, next week, we do see him coming more and more to the realization, you're the next king. Now, he thinks he's going to be second in command. Turns out that's not the case, but the conversation between Jonathan and David is really, and this is why I think of the mentor thing, Jonathan is setting David up to be the next king.
Right.
And he thinks he'll be a part of his, cadre or whatever, but he knows he's not going to be the king. So how can I help you? How can I put you in the best position?
Yeah, so Saul sends David on various missions, gives him more and more people responsibilities.
Which obviously wasn't the day after Goliath because he's still young, right? So there's some time that's happening here. We're not just jumping days; we're jumping, probably years in these chapters here.
And you would think Saul would be happy, right? I mean, here's a guy winning my battles, or
Yeah.
but he was resentful.
Yeah.
Instead, so we see things like the evil spirit caused him to throw a spear on at least 2 occasions.
Yep.
And Saul,
At David trying to
at David,
trying to pin him to the wall. I love that little phrase.
Exactly.
It's not funny, but it's
It's like dodgeball. You can never hit the little guys. But it also says Saul feared David because the Lord was with him.
Yep.
Instead of Saul.
Yep.
We find out later that David ends up marrying Saul's second daughter.
Yep.
So again, not the day after Goliath,
Right.
right? This is some years later.
Well, what's interesting though is because in chapter 17, Saul had promised his oldest daughter to whoever beat Goliath.
Right. Yeah.
Well, and David's like, okay, I'm a shepherd. I don't deserve your oldest daughter. Why should I be the king's son-in-law? Well, he's trying to get him closer and closer. And so, so now it's his second daughter who they actually love each other.
And it said, she actually loved him.
Yeah.
Which is important later. And it even says this scared Saul more. But Saul continues to be at odds with David. Chapter 19, Saul continues to try to kill David, and of course he fails. So then, he says, "Hey, Jonathan, go kill David."
Yeah.
And
Jonathan's like, I'm
Yeah.
gonna do this.
So instead, Jonathan tells David that his dad's trying to kill him, right? Which is good. And then Jonathan talks some sense into Saul.
Yeah.
And Saul seems like, okay, I'm better now. I'm not going to try to kill him. But more than likely, he's just saying that to Jonathan.
Yeah.
Because he continues to try to kill
Yeah,
David.
it certainly doesn't last very long.
Yeah. So at the end, David has to escape through a window, helped by Saul's daughter.
In his own house, right? Because,
Yeah.
Saul
Troops
sends
are coming.
assassins to David's house to kill him. And now here's one of my problems with this. He pretends to be sick, whatever. That's fine. This is war, But it says that his wife took a household idol and put it on the bed, and then put a quilt made of goat's hairs over its head, and then covered the idol with a garment. It's like, a dummy in the bed, right? Like they're going to fall for this. They pull back the comforter. It's like, right? But why does David's wife have an idol in the house?
Right. Exactly.
You
So
know?
is it, whose is it? And why
You
is
wouldn't
it there?
think it's David's, but this does tell you something about Saul's family,
Right.
and how this is how they see things.
So the chapter ends with God protecting David.
Mm-hmm.
Saul sends more men to kill David. God fills him with the Spirit, has him prophesizing. And finally Saul went to do it. And he starts prophesizing himself too. Which is kind of interesting.
So this is the second time that
Right.
Saul was filled with the Spirit and began to prophesy, right? So God is obviously still working through him or whatever. It actually reminds me of Balaam in Numbers, chapters 22, 23, 24, where he was
donkey?
hired. The donkey, right? He was hired to curse Israel. He's like, listen, I will say whatever God allows me to say. Right. Sort of the same thing here. He hated David. He wanted to kill David. But when God actually stepped into his life at this moment, there's nothing he could do.
Yeah.
There's nothing he could do.
So I was wondering, right? The Holy Spirit comes on you. Of course you're excited. You're happy. And then you mess up and it leaves you. And you got to have a hole.
Yeah.
Right? So it comes on you a second time. You have a second chance. I don't see any repentance.
No.
I don't see any changes. There's still the hatred that's there.
Yeah.
It's like, wow.
So this is what we talked about this several chapters ago, because it says that God did a work in Saul's heart. I'm not seeing that as a salvation, like we would talk today about salvation. He certainly didn't have the Holy Spirit permanently in him, like it seems like maybe David did. And we do, definitely. But Saul is it seems like he's actively pushing against God. And
Right.
so when the Holy Spirit grabs a hold of him for a minute, for an overnight or something, I mean, there's nothing he can do about it, but he sure doesn't like it.
Yeah.
He certainly doesn't like it. And he goes back to his old ways and maybe even worse than he was before.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So that brings us to the end of the chapter, and where we're at is nothing has changed. Saul is still king. He's still at odds with David. David is now on the run, and we'll see that he runs for a while.
Yeah, yeah. So, again, some of these things are very well known, especially if you grew up in church or you went to Sunday school, or some of these are favorite Bible stories. But let's not miss the purpose why they're here. We're still seeing a faithful God. We're seeing rebellious human heart at odds with each other, and God is doing His work. And Saul makes some choices that he has to pay the consequences for. But there's nothing that Saul can do, David can do, Samuel can do that will thwart God's plan. And I think that's a really cool thing that we can trust when God says what He will do. So hopefully you find that helpful and encouraging for you. Share this with your friends and family whom you know can be encouraged the same way. Subscribe and like and do all the things, and we'll see you back here next time.
Bye.